Thank you so much. I guess everybody who's in this room loves dinosaurs and anything prehistoric, right? What a magical time that must have been. You had these giant creatures lolling around, and you had fantastic trees and amazing sets of creatures, primordial landscapes that were constantly being made and unmade, obliterated by cataclysmic events. All of that, of course, spread over millions of years. And there's nobody better among the young paleontologists I can imagine. And I read a lot. Let me tell you, I read a lot of books on paleontology. And there's nobody at the cutting edge who knows about what's happening in the world of paleontology better than Steve Brusatte, who's here. I think it's a special privilege for all of us who are in this room. He is young. He's like I said, right at the forefront, making the finest discoveries that are actually reorienting our understanding about not just the timing and the kind of creatures and the new types of fossils, but also the very definition of several periods and creatures that coexisted, which we imagined was not the case. I'm going to ask Steve the first question about what inspired you to take up paleontology. It is a subject that even within earth sciences is a subset of the larger realm of the sciences. So what inspired you?
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming out. I know it's Monday, the last day of the festival, so it's great to see you all. And this is my first time in India. It's been so much fun the last few days. And a few years back, I did a talk with Pranay during the pandemic. So we did it remotely. I was sitting in Scotland at home doing this talk. And I'm so happy to be here again sharing the stage. Pranay's book, Indica, is excellent. If you want to know about the history, the deep history of India, this is your book. They have it in the bookshop. But, okay, to answer your question, right. So I live in Scotland now. I live in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, and I've lived there for a while. But those of you that know your accents will know that I'm not Scottish. I come from the middle part of America. I come from nearby Chicago, the great city in the central part of America, and I grew up in a small town in farm country. And I have two younger brothers, and one of my younger brothers, Chris, became obsessed with dinosaurs when he was about 5 or 6 years old, and he turned his bedroom into a dinosaur museum. He had all the posters on the wall of Jurassic Park, and he had his own little dinosaur library, like probably 100 books on dinosaurs. And I didn't care at all about dinosaurs, but over the years, he kind of wore me down. And just being with him, I got to learn about his love of dinosaurs. And I realized when I was in high school, when I was about 14 or 15 years old, something just clicked, and I became fascinated with dinosaurs. Not only dinosaurs, but all fossils. These clues from prehistory, from millions or billions of years ago that we can find and we can study and we can use to learn about how our Earth has changed over time. And ever since then, I've been totally fascinated, smitten with dinosaurs and other fossils, and it's a great privilege to be able to do this as a career, dig up dinosaurs, write about dinosaurs, visit interesting places around the world.
Right, I think, see.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, when you have a younger brother kind of coaxing you, or, on a daily basis, you're getting talked into loving dinosaurs or anything prehistoric. And, I wanted to ask you about your early journey into this whole, you did your studies first in America, then you came to Edinburgh, and then you went for your PhD back to New York.
That's right.
And, you've had some brilliant mentors, and I can see that, it's been a process in which you've actually, got and learned from the finest in the field. How's that process been, and what has it been in terms of inspiration for the students that you mentor now?
I've been incredibly fortunate to have some great mentors, great teachers at every stage, from high school in my small town all the way through university and in grad school. And that's so instrumental, probably for any career, but especially as a scientist, just being able to work with excellent people, people who are leaders in their field, but also nice people, interesting people, people that took me on expeditions around the world. I realized looking back, how important that was for me, and I try to be that kind of mentor to my students. So I'm a professor at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. If any of you are interested in studying fossils, dinosaurs, rocks, geology, please consider coming to Edinburgh, where the entire science of geology started a few centuries ago. But I run a lab. I have students. I teach students of all ages. And I try to do those things that my mentors did for me. Give opportunities, bring students out, dig up dinosaurs together. And there's nothing more exciting, truly, than going out somewhere, exploring, looking for fossils, and finding a fossil. Whether it's a dinosaur bone, whether it's a trilobite, a fossil leaf, in that moment, you've found something that's millions of years old that nobody's ever seen before, no human's ever seen before. You're like a detective, but you're investigating the history, the prehistory of the earth. That is magical. Some of you in the crowd maybe have had those moments. If you haven't, I beg of you, find a way, somehow, go out, look for fossils, find fossils yourselves, and some of you might become so enthused, maybe you'll want to follow my path in studying fossils for a career.
Yeah, I know. This is, when I found my first fossil, this was 26 years ago, or maybe 27 years ago, I didn't know what it was, and we didn't know where to go. I mean, in India, it's difficult to know a geologist. Where is a geologist and a paleontologist over that? So, yeah, the excitement of finding your fossil and finding a new fossil each time, or of course, there's a bed and you might find a new creature within that bed, and even if you've explored it for, excavated it for about decades, you might still find something new. And that's the beauty of having discovered a fossil. And those of you, I guess 80% of you are here from Jaipur. There are some fascinating sites not too far from here that you should consider going to. The tragedy of the situation is that landscapes are being obliterated, not just in India or in Rajasthan or near Jaipur. Of course, we've seen the plight of the Aravalis. But I think it's happening the world over. How do we look at landscapes differently? How do we get inspired by landscapes that have been there for billions or millions of years? We consider them to be inert, but they are not. They are repositories of minerals and they are reservoirs of water. They create the channels in which minerals would move. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what we were talking about just 3 minutes ago, that a geologist is a person, or somebody who studied earth sciences, is somebody who never gets bored when you take him to a landscape, whether it's something that he or she's visited or it's a new one. Because they start unraveling layer after layer of what perhaps would have happened, the processes that happened, and they enjoy that. And I'm sure that's something that you've done, and I'm sure you would like to do that when you come next time to India.
Yes, for me, as I said, it's the first time I've had the privilege of visiting India, and of course, when I'm flying into Delhi first, and then here to Jaipur, what am I doing? I'm looking out the window, looking at the landscape, trying to read what I can see in the rocks, trying to think about what this area might have been like millions of years ago. I'm always thinking that way, and it's simply just fascinating for me. It really is, and I'm incredibly passionate about studying fossils, and I haven't lost that. And I think that's what keeps me through, keeps me writing these books. And I love writing books like the ones we're talking about here, where I can try to spread this enthusiasm as far and wide as I can. And so I hope many of you share, that enthusiasm with me. And what I will say is there's incredible fossils, as Pranay knows very well, from across India. And there's very important dinosaur fossils from India. Some of the world's very first dinosaurs, the very oldest ones, the tiny little creatures, no bigger than a dog, that started the dinosaur dynasty 230 million years ago, are from India. Then later on, some of the very biggest dinosaurs, the ones that shook the earth when they walked, ones that were literally the size of a jet airplane, the long-necked dinosaurs. You have some of the best fossils of those from India, and you have fossils of their eggs, their nesting grounds. You have fossil nests of dinosaur eggs where there's fossil skeletons of snakes that were preserved slithering through the nests, eating the eggs. You have fossils of meat-eating dinosaurs the size of buses here, the Indian cousins of T-Rex, things like Rajasaurus. And that's just a few. I could go on forever listing all the Indian dinosaurs, but there's a lot here. And I hope people appreciate that here. And I think all around the world, it's a struggle right now to find the money, to find the resources for sciences that maybe are seen as a little bit on the fringe, sciences that maybe don't have a big economic benefit immediately, sciences like paleontology. We struggle in the UK to get funding right now. We struggle in America, especially right now in America. The last 13 days, who knows what science funding is going to be. But I do hope here that there's enough young people that are interested in studying dinosaurs and other fossils, and that government, that society, that museums, that institutions are here to provide that support that's necessary.
Right, I think, I saw two children raise their hands. I think they have questions, but I would urge you to keep your questions for later. I would like, Steve, for you to tell us a little more about the early evolution of dinosaurs. And I think if you can contextualize it to India, that'd be great. Of course, this book is, I can't recommend it more. I mean, when I did the review of it, when the book was released, I was gushing, I guess. And the editor actually told me, stop gushing so much. And we know you love dinosaurs. But
I wish all reviewers were like that.
So, so you need to tell us first about your experiences about, early dinosaurs and your favorites.
Yep. And yes, I should say, we'll have some time for questions towards the end, but anybody who doesn't get a chance to ask a question now will be outside, signing the books. Please come up. I will stay as long as I need to answer all of your questions. But to answer your question about early dinosaurs, the first thing I want you to all understand is that the age of dinosaurs was long. Dinosaurs ruled the world for over 150 million years, and they were constantly changing during that time. T-Rex, which lived 66 million years ago in America, T-Rex is closer in time to you and me than it was to Stegosaurus or Brontosaurus, which lived about 150 million years ago. So let that sink in for a second. When T-Rex was alive, every Brontosaurus fossil that would ever exist was already in the ground. So the age of dinosaurs was long. And the age of dinosaurs, it took a long time for it to get going. Dinosaurs didn't mount a revolution right away. It was like a long, slow insurgency, if I can call it that. And the very first dinosaurs, including these fossils from India, 230 million years old, these first dinosaurs were living in a totally different world. There was no India back then. India was part of a supercontinent. All the land was gathered together, Pangaea, stretched from North Pole to South Pole. And then, of course, over time that changed. But when these first dinosaurs were living here, they were living in India, in Brazil, and in Argentina. And you can find their fossils in all three places. I know they seem widely separated today, but back then they were connected. And these first dinosaurs, they were not the size of buses. They were not the size of airplanes. They were not at the top of the food chain. They were not apex predators. They were not movie monsters. They lived back in the Triassic period, and you will never see Triassic Park. You'll never see it because these first dinosaurs were the size of dogs, the size of cats, a few were the size of humans, and that's it. And they were living in a world that was dominated by other types of animals. There were all these relatives of crocodiles that were the size of buses, that were the top predators. They were the ones that ruled the land. There were salamanders back then, amphibians the size of cars, and they lived in flocks, 1,000 strong, and they controlled the water. That's the world the dinosaurs rose up in. And these first dinosaurs were small, they were humble, they ate some meat, they ate some plants. There wasn't anything very special about them if you looked at them. And I think if we were alive back then, we would never guess that these small, little, forgettable animals would take over the world. They were the background characters. But then something happened, something out of the dinosaurs' control, a lucky break for the dinosaurs, but not for some other plants and animals. And that luck for the dinosaurs was that the supercontinent Pangaea started to break apart. And obviously it did. That's why we have separate continents today. And it was about 200 million years ago, as the Triassic period ended and the Jurassic period began, that the supercontinent began to crack. Little pieces started to break off and they started to move away from each other. And as that happened, eventually water, the oceans came in to fill those gaps in the land. But first, the earth bled. It bled lava. It was a time of great volcanoes for many hundreds of thousands of years. And those volcanoes opened up everywhere where the land was splitting. And those volcanoes, of course, out came a lot of lava. That was bad if you were near the volcanoes. But the bigger problem was all the carbon dioxide, the methane, these poisonous gases that were released as that lava burnt up through the earth. And that led to an extinction, a mass extinction, a time of rampant death, when many species, very quickly, all over the world, plants and animals died out. And a lot of those giant crocodiles, they died. Those giant salamanders, the size of cars, they died. But some of these dinosaurs, probably because they were small, they were flexible, they were adaptable, they could do many things, they could eat many things, they survived. They were the great survivors of this extinction. And then afterwards, as the Jurassic period dawned, some of these small little dinosaurs, including the ones right here in India, imagine they would have looked out on this new world. The volcanoes have stopped erupting. The land is moving apart. All of their competitors, their predators are gone. It's a world of new opportunity. And the dinosaurs took advantage. And it's in the Jurassic period that all of these dinosaurs we know and love, the giant ones with the long necks, the meat eaters the size of buses, the ones with plates on their backs, horns on their heads, spikes and frills and duckbills and feathers and so on, all started to evolve. And that's why the book and the films are Jurassic Park. This is when we get the dinosaurs that we all know and love, the dinosaurs we think of when we think of dinosaurs, the dinosaurs we dream of when we think of dinosaurs or in our nightmares. This is when dinosaurs properly started to rule the world, about 30 million years after the very first dinosaurs evolved. So it took them a long time, but they made it. They were there. Now dinosaurs rule the world in the Jurassic.
But the golden age of the dinosaurs was the Cretaceous.
Yes.
Yeah. And just for everybody to understand, the term Jurassic comes from the mountain called Jura, which is next to Geneva, right? The city of Geneva. And the word Cretaceous comes from chalk. Creta is chalk. So if you have a car called Creta, think about it. It's actually chalk. No, I mean, just a joke. But, you need to tell us about the Golden Age, the Cretaceous.
Yes.
And, what happened and why did such a great dynasty die out? I mean, we know the popular story, but we want to hear it from the expert.
Yes, there's a bit of a twist. So, of course, there's no T-Rexes or Rajasauruses anymore. What happened to them? Well, what happened first was they continued to evolve and adapt during the Jurassic. Some of them developed feathers. The first feathers looked like little hairs, probably just to keep their bodies warm. Then some of them turned them into wings and started to fly. That's where birds came from. That's the next book I'm doing, by the way. Right now, I'm taking a small break. I'm on sabbatical from my teaching job, and I'm taking a small break to do the follow-up, Dinosaurs, Mammals, next will be Birds. And so actually right now I'm writing about ostriches and emus and cassowaries and all these flightless birds. I just learned ostriches lived here in India, by the way, until just like 10,000 years ago or something, 7,000. I had no idea till last week. Anyway, that's a tangent. But in the Jurassic, dinosaurs, some evolved feathers, wings, started to fly. Others became these huge earth shakers. Then the Jurassic turned into the Cretaceous period. And dinosaurs continued to change, to adapt, to evolve as the world changed. Temperatures went up and down. Sea levels got high, got low. Some new volcanoes erupted. And meanwhile, dinosaurs adapted. They continued to adapt. By about 66 million years ago, this is the end of the Cretaceous, you had amazing dinosaurs here in India. India had broken totally free of Pangaea by that point. It was an island by itself, racing northwards to eventually collide with Asia to form the Himalayas. And you had dinosaurs living on this Indian island in isolation, cut off from the rest of the world. At the same time, you had T-Rex in North America. You had Triceratops with the horns. And you had some of the biggest long-necked dinosaurs, both in North America and also different ones in India. Dinosaurs were thriving. They had been around already for over 170 million years. They were still in control. They were still dominant. They were still the biggest animals, the biggest predators. They still filled roles throughout the food chain. Weird new ones were still evolving. Dinosaurs were still ruling the world. And then something suddenly dramatically changed. And very quickly, all dinosaurs except for birds died out. And the classic story, which many of you probably know, is that there was something happened from outer space. Something came from outer space. A big asteroid crashed into the earth. And that did happen. 66 million years ago, there was a rock hurtling through space, more than 10 kilometers wide, this rock. It was traveling like 10 times faster than a speeding bullet. Could have gone anywhere, just a random piece of space junk. And it just so happened to directly smash into the earth, into what's now Mexico. Right at the edge of the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf of America. Anyway. And so it detonated, it impacted with the force of over 1 billion nuclear bombs put together, this asteroid. It punched a hole in the earth, more than 150 kilometers wide, a crater. You can still see it in Mexico. A lot of it's covered by the water, but some of it's still there on land. This was catastrophic. The biggest asteroid to hit the earth in at least the last 500 million years. And we see evidence for all the death it caused around the world quite suddenly. We see all kinds of plants and animals die out. We see evidence in the rocks for tsunamis. There's these layers of rocks formed by tsunamis where there's chunks of other rocks that are bigger than houses, ripped up by these waves. There was global firestorms. Forest fires raged around the world. All this stuff that was vaporized by the asteroid explosion went up into the atmosphere, cooled, and fell back down as bullets of hot glass that superheated the atmosphere. Earthquakes out of the scale of anything humans have ever witnessed. All kinds of immediate death and destruction. And dinosaurs, at least the big ones, the famous ones, didn't make it very long afterwards. But there's a twist in the story, right?
That's right.
And so, that twist, it's an Indian twist. Now, I don't know, do any of you know, have any of you heard of the Deccan Traps? Raise your hand if you heard of the Deccan Traps, some of you. I'm sure you probably know the Deccan region of India. So the Deccan Traps, this is the geological name for this huge expanse of basaltic rock, this dark rock that was made from ancient volcanoes, both rock that was erupted and rock that solidified underground from this ancient, enormous volcanic system. These volcanoes, some of the biggest in Earth history, not just a volcano that erupts one day and spews out some ash, but volcanoes that were erupting for millions of years, spewing out rivers of lava for millions of years. These volcanoes were erupting at the same time the asteroid hit. So go figure, right? What kind of bad luck was that? This asteroid falls from the sky, biggest one in 500 million years, and it happens to hit at a time when these volcanoes are doing terrible damage. And as we already talked about earlier, there were other volcanoes that caused this global warming, that caused this extinction, that helped kill off the competitors of the dinosaurs. Well, now the tables had turned. Now the dinosaurs were the dominant ones, and these volcanoes and then the asteroid were affecting them. So there's huge debate among geologists and paleontologists now about just how important those volcanoes were in killing the dinosaurs, how important the asteroid was, which one was more important, did they work together? Maybe did the asteroid impact even make the volcanoes worse? I mean, the volcanoes were already erupting, But if you, hit the Earth with this huge, 1 billion nuclear bombs worth of energy, did that make the volcanoes erupt more? There's this leading idea that some geophysicists, physicists that study the Earth, have proposed along these lines. But this is a very active area of debate right now. There are paleontologists, really, as we speak, that are arguing about the role of volcanoes versus the asteroid. But regardless, by the time that the asteroid and the volcanoes had done their job, all the T-Rexes, all the Triceratopses, all the long-necked dinosaurs, all the Rajasauruses, they were all gone within probably 20,000 years of the asteroid hitting. And you had some feathery little dinosaurs that could flap their wings. They survived. These are the ancestors of today's birds. And then you had some small, furry little things scurrying around in the shadows. They were smart. They were warm-blooded. They had big brains. They fed their babies milk. These were mammals. These were our ancestors. They were held down by the dinosaurs for a long time. For over 150 million years, you never had a mammal bigger than a house cat. And now the dinosaurs are gone except for birds, and mammals had an opportunity, and mammals, as well as birds, took advantage. And that's really the foundation of the world that we have today.
Fabulous. A round of applause, please. This is perhaps the most eloquent way to put the great
So
story.
in a way, we should be thankful for the asteroid and the Deccan volcanoes, because our mammal ancestors would have probably never had that opportunity. And it's weird to think about that. It's kind of morbid to think about these periods of death in Earth history. But every extinction does pave the way for renewal, for rebirth. And that's what happened, and that's why we are here as mammals.
Creative destruction.
Creative destruction.
Just like the time in the Triassic when the salamanders, the giant amphibians, and the Chasmosaurus in the water were, playing havoc on the diminutive dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. And this time, you see the rise again of what are called the land crocodiles.
Yes.
And then you see the rise of birds. The birds were the first to take over, and they were
This is
competing
the
with the
next
crocodiles.
chapter I'm going to write when I get
so
back.
you want to hear
it's
that
going to
next
be chapter
chapter.
8 in the bird book.
That's
about, right. And Pranay's totally right, that yes, birds survived the extinction. Actually, most birds died. There were lots of birds living overhead of T-Rex and Triceratops. Some of them still had teeth, some had long tails, some had big gnarly claws. And they all died except for modern-style birds, the ones that have no teeth, that have beaks, that have big wings, high metabolisms. And then some of those surviving birds, within a few 100,000 years, basically took back control of some of those dinosaur ecological roles. They grew to big sizes. You had birds that stood 3 meters tall, that weighed 500 kilos. You had birds with ferocious beaks and claws that were the top predators in some ecosystems. You had other birds that were the big plant eaters. So dinosaurs did fight back, and in some places they remained this way. New Zealand, where Pranay lives now, it was only about 800 years ago, I guess, the Maori, the great Polynesian seafarers, were the first humans to step foot on New Zealand. And when they arrived, did they find lions and elephants and tigers and monkeys? No. The only mammals there were some bats that had flown over, and then some whales that were living along the coast. It was a land totally devoid of the mammals we're all familiar with. And what animals were in control, what animals held dominion in Zealandia, this lost continent, until 800 years ago? Dinosaurs, in the form of birds. 3-meter tall birds, 500-kilo birds, eagles with wingspans of like 3.5 meters, the top predators, the biggest raptorial birds ever. So really, this age of dinosaurs has continued, quite close to the modern day. And I've always said, if you were in Zealandia 800 years ago, in New Zealand, if you were a Maori and you came onto that land, it would be as strange as it would be for us to find some little island somewhere today where people in togas are watching gladiators fight lions and swearing fealty to Caesar. This was the last remnant of the dinosaur empire, and it persisted so recently.
Absolutely. And I think, therefore, this book could also read not just Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, but also Rise and Rise of Dinosaurs. In fact, birds, as we know, many of us are bird watchers. the resplendent variety of birds that we have now, has also seen a severe numbers of cycles of rise and fall. So we don't have the giant birds. They survived only in the southern land masses, the Gondwana. So largely the flightless birds lived in islands because they got gigantic because of the island nature. Of course, ostrich is an exception to the rule. And Steve was right. I mean, we've had ostriches from western parts of India, from here in Rajasthan, even Maharashtra, actually. We have fossils from ostrich egg beads that we found from 7,000 years ago, going as far as Morocco. So, that swathe of land had ostriches. So the point I want to make here is, Steve, that you need to perhaps tell us more about mammals. I mean, and also the background story of the Goldilocks events that happened enabled that the mammals could become who they are today.
Yep. I should say first, with this bird book, you say the rise and rise of the birds. I don't have a title yet. We have some working titles, so if anybody has a good idea, and I've noted it down, we'll see what my editors think. But if you do have a good idea, tell me afterwards. But mammals. So the book I wrote after the rise and fall of the dinosaurs is called The Rise and Reign of the Mammals. It's another pop science book. It picks up the story after the dinosaur extinction, where our ancestors, stared down the asteroids, survived, and then made a new world. And then I backtrack and go to the beginning of mammal history. Our family, the mammal family, has a very deep history. The first true mammals, so the little animals with hair that fed their babies milk, with big brains, fast metabolisms, keen intelligence and senses, the first true mammals evolved at the same time as those first dinosaurs here in India, 230 million years ago, roughly, on the supercontinent. But from there, dinosaurs and mammals had separate fates. They were both in the shadows at the beginning, but then the dinosaurs had the opportunity to take over those big niches, the top of the food chain, the big plant eaters. And so dinosaurs went big. Not all dinosaurs, but many dinosaurs. And they became the largest animals ever to live on land. Meanwhile, mammals stayed small. The dinosaurs kept them small. And for 150 million years or so, there were mammals living with dinosaurs. True, proper mammals, again, with hair, feeding their babies milk, but living in the shadow of the dinosaurs, only coming out at night, living in the underbrush, sticking underground in burrows, trying to hide away from that single foot stomp of a T-Rex that would end them. And it might seem like mammals were kind of pathetic, they were kind of the losers of that scenario. Absolutely not. Mammals became very good at living in the shadows, at living anonymously, at being adaptable, at being flexible, at being able to deal with change. And that put them in a good position when the asteroid hit. Now, the more we realize from fossil mammal discoveries, and there's some from India, but there's a lot from China that have been found recently, we understand that those mammals living with the dinosaurs were incredibly diverse and successful in their own ways. They just were small. They never got bigger than a house cat. But there were mammals living with dinosaurs that were runners, that were scurriers, that climbed trees, that dug burrows, that could swim. There were even mammals that evolved wings of skin to glide between the trees. So there would have been little mammals gliding over the heads of dinosaurs. And the mammals were so good at being small and living in those ecological roles that they kept the dinosaurs big, okay? And what I mean by that is you never saw a T-Rex the size of a mouse or a triceratops the size of a rat. It seems preposterous, right? And that's not because dinosaurs couldn't do it. It's because the mammals were already there, living those lifestyles. And that's how it was until the asteroid hit, until those Deccan volcanoes started to erupt. That wiped away the giant dinosaurs. Why they were so big, probably it was hard for them to adapt to such sudden change. They had to eat a lot of food. Imagine how much a T-Rex needed to eat every day. It took them a long time to grow from a baby into an adult. They couldn't really dig a burrow. Imagine T-Rex digging a burrow right in the ground with his little arms. Imagine that. But the mammals, The mammals, they were small, they grew fast, they could eat lots of different foods, they were adaptable. They had been fine-tuned 150 million years having to survive the terror of the dinosaurs. So that helped mammals survive the asteroid. And from there, mammals proliferated. And not too long after the dinosaurs died, you got all kinds of new mammals on land, in the water, small mammals, big mammals. And you even had mammals do incredible things. You had bats evolve. Wings, but wings that could flap and fly through the air, not just glide, but flap, just like birds do. And then you had here in India, as India was approaching Asia, about to collide to form the Himalayas, you had these little mammals with hooves. They looked like little deer. And these mammals started to hang around the water a little bit. We don't know why. Maybe the water was safe, maybe there was food they liked to eat there. But they became better and better adapted to the water, to the point where they turned their hooves into flippers. And they became whales. So whales evolved from land mammals right here in India. And it's basically a story of Bambi turning into Moby Dick. And there are fossils that show, maybe not every step of the sequence, but that show that evolution in action. Some of the most famous, most important fossils ever found in India. And I could go on and on and on, but it's an honor for me to be here in this country finally that's done so much for paleontology, that's given us so much information on the history of life and evolution. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. All the cultural revolutions and upheavals that take place also have a plant story and a planktonic story and a microbial story. So I think, when you see the larger picture, and especially children, do not see this as a single trajectory, because you need to understand the role of flowering plants, the evolution of grasses, and a lot of other churnings that are taking place on the planet. So, it's not a single driving force of evolution that is taking forward this process. I'm going to open up for questions. We've got 6 minutes, and I know, Yuvan, you're excited. You will get your chance later.
And again, please, we'll be outside afterwards. I'll answer any questions that you have,
yes.
Okay?
Okay. Children first. Sorry. There are kids who've been raising their hand. There was a child there who had raised his hand first. Quick. Only the question, please.
And I can't give you any plot spoilers for the new Jurassic World film, by the way. So yes. We got a new film coming out. I work on the films. I'm the science consultant, and there's a new one coming out this summer. I will tell you, though, there are some Indian dinosaurs that have inspired some of the new characters. Oh, wow. Okay. And that's all I can say. But anyway.
Quick.
Sir, may I know that who have inspired you to write about those dinosaurs?
Mm-hmm. When I was about 14, 15 years old, talking to my brother, in his bedroom, his dinosaur museum bedroom, he would show me his books all the time. And that's how I started to learn about dinosaurs. I grew up far from a big city, far from any museums, in the middle, literally, of cornfields and soybean fields. That's where my school was, in between two fields. And it was those books that taught me, that inspired me. And I read as much as I could. And I remember a year or two into becoming so enthused about dinosaurs, I said, one day I want to write a book like this that could inspire younger people. So I've always wanted to do it. And I've been very fortunate just to, have the opportunity to do it and now make a career doing this. And it's fantastic. So for all of you that, whatever your passion or enthusiasm might be, follow it, okay? It doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to make a career out of it, or it might change. Maybe next month you'll be enthused about something different. But if there's something as a young person that you really like, that interests you, that inspires you, that you dream about, that you think about, take it as far as you can, because nothing in life, not intelligence, not physical strength, nothing is more important than that determination and that passion. That's certainly been true for me.
Very well put, very well put. I think getting infected by a dinosaur, by the dinosaur mania was
written by a guy who writes about viruses, being infected.
Right. Okay. A gentleman here who's been waving his hand frantically, but only the question, please.
Yeah, hello sir, welcome to Jaipur and
Thank you.
India. I hope you had a good time.
It's been great.
So I have two questions.
One question, quickly.
Do the second one out there.
Outside, yeah,
Yeah,
quick.
okay. So even before the Cretaceous extinction period, the population of the dinosaurs were on a decline, as I saw in one of the segments of National Geographic. And the theory largely remains unclear. So what's your take on that? Because like Pranay sir said, that evolution is not a straight thing.
Yeah.
Many parallel narratives are taking place. So what's your take?
My take is that that's wrong, actually, that dinosaurs were not in decline. There is an idea in the paleontology academic literature that goes back to the 1980s that dinosaurs were declining. And that's because people found fewer fossils of dinosaurs right before, like, the asteroid layer. It turns out the more people have looked since the 80s, the more they've found. This was just a bias. People hadn't looked enough. And they hadn't looked enough outside of North America. Yeah. So there was no decline. Their dinosaurs were still thriving.
Okay. The lady in front, yes, please, go ahead.
Hi.
You mentioned the Brontosaurus earlier, and I remember when I was a kid that they said that wasn't a real dinosaur. So I'm wondering, what was that about?
So this gets to probably the most boring thing about paleontology, how people fight over names, how to classify things. But basically, way back, like well over 100 years ago, a scientist found the fossil of a big long-necked dinosaur and called it Apatosaurus. Then, like a year or two later, another scientist found another one and called it Brontosaurus. And they thought they were different. Later, scientists said, no, they're the same thing, the same species. And because Apatosaurus was named first, that keeps the name. And that's what all the books said when I was starting to learn about dinosaurs. But 10 years ago, a new group of young scientists, they looked at all the fossil evidence and they found that actually Brontosaurus is distinctive. There's 4 or 5 features of its skeleton not seen in any other dinosaur. So Brontosaurus is back. Use the name, and I love it because it's a name people know. Yes.
Absolutely. The gentleman here and then the lady here. Only the question, please.
Hello. In the past 10 years, I found that there's been so much change in the way we kind of see a dinosaur from like that's been around for so long. Things like feathers on tyrannosaurids, spinosaurids. And I feel like at this point, you have younger generations getting so disillusioned with paleontology itself. They're like, what is this all based on? This is all speculation. So how do you combat that? How do I combat it as just a layperson talking to someone else?
You think there's disillusionment? I hope not.
I feel like there is.
I think, well, there's certainly online communities that argue about these things, but look, you're absolutely right that over the past decade, there's just been a tremendous amount of new discoveries. People are finding more dinosaurs than ever before. There's about 1 new species found every week, somewhere around the world on average. And why is it? It's because there's young people in China, in Mongolia, in South Africa, in Argentina, Brazil, hopefully here in India too, finding new fossils. That's a good thing. But with a lot of new evidence, of course, comes a lot of new information to process and a lot of debate. And so I think that's what we're seeing. And we now know a lot of dinosaurs had feathers. Before it was speculation, now we know it from actual fossils. And I think it just takes time for this to filter through and to stabilize. But I like it. I think it's a sign of a good, vibrant, exciting field.
Right, the lady here, and then we close.
Yep, and again, we'll be out signing books, both of us, and any questions you have, please come up. I love talking about dinosaurs, as you can tell. Anyway.
So what do you feel about Arctic ice thawing and revealing new fossils as a paleontologist versus the aspect of climate change?
Yeah. I mean, what's happening with climate obviously is incredibly worrying. Things are happening very fast. There have been several great panels here about this. You should all read John Vallant's book, Fire Weather. You should all read James Bradley's new book on the oceans. And you see, I mean, this is very worrying. And obviously, if there was some magic button, we'd all, I would hope, push it to stop climate change. But as a paleontologist, I guess the one single thing that might end up being okay for us is that, as the ice is thawing, new fossils are kind of falling out, like the chunks of raisins and melting ice cream or something. It's not good. I don't want it that way, but it is true already, especially in Antarctica, this is happening, and there's a lot more discoveries. These discoveries will revolutionize our understanding of evolution. I know that, but I hate that it comes at the cost of the health of our planet.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Brusatte, and he'll be signing
Thank
books
you.
outside.
And
Please
get this
do
book
buy this
too.
book.
Thank you all.
It's the best I have read in the last 25 years.
Very
And
sweet,
really,
thank you.
I can't recommend it anymore.
And again, we'll answer your questions. I'll sign any books. And if you have a good title for the bird book, please tell me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this brilliant discussion.